All right, so this is the Purchasing Reliability Working Group meeting for February the 2nd. I'll start with the opening. So just a FYI that I've added a table to the top of this agenda, which maps out our roadmap to technical foundation work. We went over this in detail last time, but I thought it'd be nice to have this just sit at the very top of the document so that we can understand how these things are mapped. I've also added one thing for the e-commerce motion. So assessing the compatibility portion of the build versus buy assessment. That is somewhat dependent on what our future state architecture here ends up being. So when it comes to build versus buy, there's sort of two parts that we're assessing. There's the what sort of customization do we need in a buy solution? And is that possible with the existing off-the-shelf solutions? Or is it something that we need to custom build? And then the second thing is that compatible with our existing systems? A lot of the off-the-shelf buy solutions come with their own backends, but we're bringing our own backend here, which is Zuora. So understanding exactly how all of that is architected, I think that sort of stems back into some of the broader architectural topics which we're discussing in this working group. Any questions or thoughts on this? Otherwise, we'll move down to initiatives.
I would just add that on the build versus buy thing, on the buy side, really the only things that we're looking at today, at least to start with, are buy packages that integrate directly into Zuora, where there's a relationship there. So Justin and I took a look at we met with the CEOs of two of them last Friday and then on Monday. And we're going to set up some demos and record those so people can start to see like what some of those capabilities are. And those will be extended out in a synchronous way, but then of course we'll record them for people that can't join the meeting.
And we're also kicking off our first working group meeting for the e-commerce motion later today. So just a FYI, that will drive most of that conversation in that meeting as well. I'll move down to initiatives. So one of the things you'll notice is that the document's been slightly restructured. And I think as we have more and more of these meetings, we'll try to have a more well-structured working group as well. The first one is the customers.azure to GCP migration. So I wanted to just provide an update there. We are still tracking on a target date of February the 5th, which is this weekend. We're about 90% done. And I've linked over to the different checklists and dry runs that we've been going through. One thing to note is we're going to have SRE and support engaged alongside a fulfillment infra for the cutover this weekend. And I've linked over to some more details there. We don't have any blockers at this moment, but we're just working through the communication and the nice to haves just to ensure that it goes smoothly. And Jack, you've got a comment there.
But it's answered up in the issue. Thank you.
Awesome.
And I wanted to clarify a couple of things. Jerome, one, I assume like we're going to have log aggregation to Elasticsearch set up day one or no?
Not day one. We're going to be going live with just more of, I guess, a minimal type of logging at this point or minimal alerting while we're continuing to build that out.
Okay.
James, did you want to provide any additional details on that?
So we are close to having Elasticsearch enabled, but we may not have it for day one. However, this is the same situation as we have now. Like we never had enable in the past. The good news is that maybe next week we may be able to have the logs there.
And you're saying it'll be in like Stackdriver, right? Like we can get the data if something happens, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
And we have to ship it to some other bucket in GCP for compliance reasons as well. That will stay the same.
Okay.
So we're hoping for a smooth cutover. We've done a lot of prep work for this, but it is going to be a big item which we're undertaking over the weekend. So we hope to report back next week with some positive news. I'll move down to the next item, which is data modeling and integrations across systems. So once again, this is broken down into sort of 3 sections: current state, future state, and then the implementation work. Under current state, under data models, we now have customers.gitlab and Zora data models documented on that spreadsheet that's linked. James has linked over to a customers.erd, which we've used in the past. Maybe what I'll do, James, is I'll talk through next steps, and then you can sort of talk through some of our prior art that we've done. So now that we have customers.gitlab and Zora data models documented, what we'd like to do is have ERDs, so entity relationship diagrams for each system, documented, and then also start documenting what this looks like across many systems. So I'll do a quick screen share of what an ERD looks like. So this is an entity relationship diagram, which is basically documenting out your database schema. This is what we used to have for customers.dot. And what we're aiming to do here is have this for customers.dot, but also have another one for GitLab, just the specific tables that relate to billing and subscription, and then also have one for Zora. And then what we'll have is a larger single diagram that starts to show the linkages across all of these. So I guess, James, maybe I'll talk to your part that you were going to share. In the past, what we've done is we used to have the license.dot and customers.dot applications. And under these ERDs, we had a color coding, which would show what fields were shared between the different systems. So for instance, purple here would be shared between license.dot and Zora. Blue here would be shared between license.dot, customers.dot, and Zora. What we're thinking of doing is, instead of using color coding, we're going to try to put all of these onto this single diagram so we can see how the data models are between customers.gitlab and Zora. And then we can even throw Salesforce in there as well if we'd like. And then instead of doing the color coding, we can actually have a line linking over to the other ERDs in the other systems. And that way we'll have a really clear picture of what each system's data model looks like and what the specific reference columns are. We're planning to put this inside of either Plant UML or inside of a mermaid chart so that we can sort of track this. I'll pause there and see if anyone has any thoughts.
Well, Jerome, I think this is great. Thank you, especially the differentiate between license.dot and customers.dot, because I know that confuses a lot of folks. The other thing I wanted to add is that as long as we can get all of the customers.dot and licensing.dot infrastructure mapped to Zora, we get Salesforce for free because that just follows the enterprise Zora connections. So yes, cool, but I'm more interested on all roads leading to Zora.
Agreed. James, is there anything that I might have missed there?
Nope.
One other item I wanted to add is where we should document all of this. So I was thinking we could add this to the quote to cash page. And I wanted to check with Brian and Christopher if that would be okay with you.
100%, yes.
Yep. 100%.
And,
I just wanted to make sure as a follow-up item that we did get the mermaid chart going. We're looking for people to help contribute to that page. So please feel free to do so. And then we also did add the top misused terms around Zora so that we can start being specific around the different modules that we're focusing on when we're working on these these reliability improvements.
Thanks. I'll update our different documents to start showing Zora billing. So that's the current state for data models. I wanted to now shift over to talking about the future state for our data models. So on the document, I'm starting to look at number 2B21A, I think. So as we're starting to think about our future state, there's a few things that we, a few different things that we've been looking at in the last few months or over the last few years. The first is this idea of having a customer or billing entity. And currently we don't have this. We have our I guess sort of the concept of accounts linked directly over to a single namespace. And with some of the work that's happening with workspaces, this dynamic will change. So I think one of the things that we want to do is start thinking about what does a customer or billing entity look like and how this ties into workspaces. We have some workspaces documentation linked, and I've also provided a couple examples of what AWS does. So AWS has an elastic compute bill, which I'll do a quick screen share of. And on a bill like this, you basically have your different instances. So for instance, if you're using like a T2 micro or T2 medium and the number of hours that you've used for each one. As we move towards billing, which may be across different workspaces or different instances, we could look at having a bill that looks somewhat similar to this, where we have multiple instances of workspaces listed out here, along with something like seat usage and the actual amount that they're billed at. I'm just showing this as an example in terms of what AWS does so that we can start thinking about possibly something similar. And then I've also linked over to AWS consolidated billing. So with AWS, they actually allow you to have multiple billing accounts roll up into a single account, which might be something that we want to keep in mind as we're thinking through what a customer billing entity might look like. The idea behind this is that if AWS is working with a large organization, which sort of has different procurement processes, each of those accounts, or it may be each of those functions or departments, they can all have their own bills, which roll up into one larger bill. So I think that's also an interesting idea to explore. Thoughts on all of this? I think, Marshall, you've got the first comment.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, is what you're thinking that we should go ahead and create this abstraction to insulate ourselves from that change in customers dot, like proactively? Because my understanding is a workspace is going to be a collection of top level namespaces, basically, right? I think you're saying it could go a step further and be across multiple instances, which I think is also interesting. But yeah, okay, I think that makes sense too.
Yeah, I think if we're doing this on, I think it makes sense to do it first on the customers dot side, and then have workspaces sort of meet us there. The way I look at it is, if we define a customer, that customer can be linked over to one workspace, or it could be linked over to multiple workspaces. So if workspaces isn't ready, then we'll just have one workspace linked over to one customer. Eventually, when workspaces is ready, then we could sort of have that one-to-many relationship. So it's easier to define that up front.
Jerome, on the next one, would we consider, I know we're trying to define customer and how multi-namespaces work with them, that's awesome. But over in Zora, we have a very discrete functional definition of customer that's guaranteed to invoice correctly and bill correctly and also flow to the GL correctly. So wouldn't we want to work backwards from that? And my original suggestion, this is all cool what you just said. My original suggestion was leave that to be the definition of customer and have our stuff simply reference it so we can't get mixed up.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that is the way to approach it. So you sort of work with what Zuora supports and then work backwards from there. I think the way which I would think of this is right now what's in Zuora. So I would think of this as sort of pushing Zuora, Zuora's definition of a customer to make that one-to-one to what we have inside of customers dot, and start to push things downwards towards the SKU level. So if you think of that bill, which I was screen sharing earlier, you had multiple line items, right? And each one of those line items could be a specific instance, or it could be a workspace. We could think of it like that, but that's just an idea right now. But so instead of having them on the same level, you sort of shift it downwards one. I'm not sure if I'm doing a good job of explaining that.
No, I'm following you. I'm just worried that what I'm hearing when I translate my head is that one customer, multiple subscriptions, and would be a subscription per namespace. Which cool, but we would have to, that opens up another whole can of worms of how we make that fit. Just cool idea. Just my thoughts on that.
Can I just comment? I think that it segues into the next topic pretty firmly around if there's we've all agreed that there's going to be Zuora SSOT that needs to be accomplished. And that, well, I'm hearing what you're saying, Jack, is that, instead of reinventing something outside of that, let's align to that SSOT capability so that that starts to go down this unified sort of customer identification across the entire company. And we're agreeing that Zuora, in this particular case around billing and the management of the contract, we need to align around that. So let's not reinvent something outside of that.
100%. If there's multiple definitions of customer in a company, I want the one that ties to the general ledger.
Correct.
Yeah. I think the way you put it earlier, Jack, one customer with multiple subscriptions is the way to think of it. Thank you for finding a much better way to describe it than I was trying to. And what you're saying, Brian, makes a lot of sense. We talked about Zuora as a single source of truth for all billing and subscription data. I think pretty much everyone on this call agrees with moving in that direction. I guess I'll ask, is there anyone on this call that has concerns about moving in that direction? So yeah, I think we're all in agreement. Sorry, Mark, I thought I saw you unmute for a second.
I'm just gonna say no.
Yeah, so since we're all in agreement that Zuora should be the single source of truth, as we're defining our future state data models, there's going to be a few things to keep in mind. So as we're sort of mapping out the entity relationship diagrams across all of the different systems, one of the things to keep in mind is which fields are the source of truth, and Zuora will hold on to most of those. Zuora doesn't hold on to absolutely everything, but it'll be the source of truth for billing and subscription data. So for instance, customers dot will hold on to some data that Zuora doesn't have. Or GitLab will hold on to some data that Zuora doesn't have, or Salesforce might as well, but the source of truth for billing and subscription data will be in Zuora. One thing to keep in mind is that as we're building out the system, we need to be really clear about what the source of truth is versus what a cache of that data is and how to retrieve it upstream. Because for performance purposes, we may cache some of that data rather than going back to Zuora, because in the past we've had lots of instances where Zuora hasn't been, online and available 24/7, which really slows down our ability to process transactions or show things to the customers. So it's likely that we will have a caching layer that is periodically synced back upstream, synced with the upstream source of truth. I know James, Tyler, Tatiana, you all were previously talking about some of the issues around caching. Were there any items that you wanted to bring up here?
No, I think.
Call out is, oh, go ahead, James.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say that there are a few things that probably the engineers need to discuss and solve for. Caching have some problems as well. I don't think we have enough callbacks or anything from Zuora that will let us know when we need to refresh that data, for example. That would be the ideal scenario. But I think those things, people like Tyler or Daniel, and so they can discuss it. I'm sure we can come up with some good solutions for those.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add, I think just abstaining from using Zuora as a database and really just caching the information that is necessary for our systems to stay up and functioning for the customer. I think if we, maybe stick with that definition would be good.
Tatiana, did you mention before that Zuora explicitly says don't use it as a database?
Yeah, well, because I don't think they, as a third-party system or SaaS system, they can be down, right? So I don't think they recommend usually to use them as a database that every time we have to pull up a page, we also have to query their API. So, and having tried to do that in the past, it is definitely unreliable. So I wouldn't do that.
We probably could think of it as like Zuora accepts writes, but shouldn't be used for most of our reads. We just do a single read to cache and then just read off of our cached version. We could look at something like that.
It seems like the if I recall correctly about how the Salesforce integration works, like the tricky thing is that for the sales initiated workflows, those take place essentially completely outside of customers dot, right? So like customers that purchased through that workflow potentially have like outages because the data never got to customers dot in the first place. Like if you're going through customers dot, you have the advantage of like, you can make a call to Zuora's API. When that call is successful, you write to the customers dot database, like sort of synchronously in that same process. But the sales initiated ones are where it's tricky, it seems like.
Well, they're guaranteed to flow into Zuora.
Right. I just mean they're not guaranteed to then propagate
Yeah.
to customers dot, which is ultimately what enables
Cool.
the subscription on the GitLab side, right?
All right. Are there other things that we want to discuss for future state? We covered data models, but any ideas or things we want to discuss today on end-to-end data flows or future state of resync, or sorry, request, retry, or sync mechanisms? If not, we will move down to the next item, which is Zuora orders and ramps. So I put this here because I think of what we're trying to do in this purchasing reliability working group is we're tracking on these large sort of technical blockers or foundational items that we need to enable a lot more of the different purchasing experiences that we want to build out. I think this is one of the big ones for Project Matterhorn. So I'm curious if it would make sense if we provide just high-level updates on how orders and ramps as a program is tracking here. I think Christopher, you've got the first comment.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to provide the update. So I think if everyone's in agreement that it makes sense, then we are looking to deploy Zuora orders is sort of the first part of this implementation, and then we would come around and do ramps. And there still are some open questions. But from a Zora orders perspective, we're now in QA. Mark here is leading that effort with the broader team. We're targeting to complete that on 2/11. And then we have a few things that we're planning so that we can move to a UAT, a full environment refresh of Salesforce and Zora together. And we need to do this in coordination with yourself as well, Jerome, and the teams to ensure that we're not unintentionally overriding anything. And then coordinating with the broader user group, because we do need to test broadly here, because we saw some impacts to some of the ARR calculations. So our target then is to launch orders in early March. And then I think Jack put together a very succinct deck on, some of the things that we need to be analyzing as we now are preparing to move to ramps. I know we just have a couple minutes left, but there's a lot of goodness in that deck.
And there's a recording coming. It's very dense. Need a recording for it. That was for the Matterhorn meeting later. It's like, what are the stepping stones to get from orders, ramps, Matterhorn, or something like a Matterhorn? So I'll pump out a recording when I can for that one.
Awesome, thank you. And then we're just up on time. So under D, I just put a FYI for some of the SOX compliance work we're doing. I'm not sure if we should track this work in this purchasing reliability working group, but I just wanted to surface that in case. Anyways, thank you everyone for joining today. Have a great day.